Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, March the 5th, 2025. So in this video I'm going to be looking at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, March the 5th, 2025. And then there's a question of my main topic. Well, you can see in the thumbnail I've got a picture of me. So, why me? And it's me in terms of me as an astrologer. I was talking to a friend last night and she was talking about my YouTube channel, and she was saying, well, why don't you make a better effort to advertise your services, tell people what you do, offer things. Everyone else does it. You could offer readings, you could answer questions, I Ching questions, certainly astrology questions, and I should be making a greater effort. And she's probably right. On the other hand, what she was kind of highlighting in me at the time was I do have a certain ambivalence, even though I have been doing astrology for the best part of 40 years. I often wonder about the value of astrology, for example, in terms of having an astrology reading. People pay money for this, people pay good money. Is it actually worth it? And is it actually going to be a worthwhile experience? And in this video, I do want to consider that question. And this video is not a form of personal advertising. In this video, I'm going to be honest, as far as I can, about, in particular, myself as an astrologer, my particular style, and also about the overall value of consulting astrologers. And perhaps one reason I'm making this video is because I want to have a video that I can always refer people to when they ask, whether or not I do charts. Of course, I do charts, and I do take money for doing charts. That is part of what I do. But yeah, at the same time, I do have a continued ambivalence to it, even though I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. But before I look at myself and me as an astrologer and what it means to be an astrologer, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, March the 5th, 2025. So here is the chart for today at noon, set for New York. If you do, by the way, like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indeed like it. If you're not subscribed, do feel free to subscribe. And so here is the chart, and the moon is in Gemini. So at noon, New York time, moon is in early Gemini, and that makes a change. The moon has been in Taurus, so moving from Taurus to Gemini, things are moving a little more. Gemini is a mutable sign. We can get some action, and we can get some variety. Indeed, we're going to want variety. We're going to want to talk about different things, and we might get bored more easily than usual. And although the moon is in Gemini, it is actually still conjunct Uranus. It's not too far from Uranus, and so at the beginning of the day, we have this moon Uranus conjunction, and that can stir things up. And it's in fixed signs, so we might have very definite ideas about the way things should be. And we might be, quite stubborn. Uranus is not just the planet of, revolution. It can be the planet of determination. There's something very determined about Uranus. It can even be a little bit brittle with with its position in Taurus in particular, that is a fixed sign. Taurus doesn't really bend. Taurus doesn't bend. It tends to sort of break or stay firm. Can it handle the pressure? And that's particularly the case, when Uranus is in Taurus. Now, I should say that the Moon moves into Gemini at 12:29 p.m. London time. So around lunchtime in Europe, the Moon moves into Gemini. So if you are in Europe or Africa, first part of the day is Moon in Taurus, last half of the day is Moon in Gemini. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the Moon is going to be in Taurus pretty much all day. If you're in the Americas, the Moon will move into Gemini, early in the morning. So if you're in New York, for example, Moon moves into Gemini at 7:29 this morning, and so the Moon continues moving through Gemini. Having made its entry into Gemini, the Moon makes a trine to Pluto in Aquarius. So, sorry, is that trine? It's a trine. Moon makes a trine to Pluto, and then it makes a sextile to Mercury. So that does indicate that many of us will have a way of words. We can explain ourselves very well, and many of us can actually be quite persuasive with Moon trine Pluto. We know what levers to push, what buttons to press. We know how to get people to listen to us, and many of us might find that we've got the gift of the gab. We can talk about just about anything, and if one avenue of conversation isn't working, when we can move to another avenue, we can talk about something different and perhaps be quite successful about it. But we can get people to listen to us, especially as Mercury is sextile Pluto. So aside from the lunar aspects, that Mercury sextile Pluto is the main aspect of the day. And Mercury in Aries is about being forthright, being definite in what we say. And sextile Pluto, we are able to create change, transformation through our words. And so, that Mercury sextile Pluto is an entirely useful aspect, though there is a question of who is using it. Now, if we don't use that Mercury sextile Pluto, then we might find that someone else is. So it might not be just us having a way with words, it might be someone else. And if we're not doing the persuading, then someone else might be trying to persuade us. So do monitor the flow of conversation. And this is especially the case if someone is trying to persuade someone else to do something or agree to something. We might have to be a little bit careful. Just because something feels light and easy on the surface doesn't mean that there isn't a current of power and manipulative energy going on, flowing below the surface. So that's the picture in New York, and really it's pretty similar for everyone else. But the Moon does change from place to place. So Moon is at 2 degrees Gemini at noon, New York time. If you're in Sydney, Australia at noon, then the Moon is earlier. The Moon is in at 3 degrees Taurus. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, you could say that the main aspect is that Moon conjunct Uranus. And so in Australia and New Zealand and East Asia, things could be a little less stable, and people could be a little more stubborn and determined, and they might believe that their ideas are the right ideas, are even the best ideas. And so it might be more difficult to come to an agreement if you're in Australia and New Zealand than if you're in, say California. And then we have the heliocentric picture. So here is the positions of the planets from a heliocentric view. Mercury is making some aspects of note. Heliocentric Mercury in Gemini is at 25 Gemini, and it's making a square to Saturn, and it's making a conjunction to Jupiter. So what that means is that Mercury is triggering the Jupiter-Saturn square. So heliocentrically, like geocentrically, we also have this Jupiter-Saturn square, but of course, from a heliocentric perspective, planets never go retrograde. So that Jupiter-Saturn square is about the business cycle. It's about the economy. Society in general, to an extent, yes. But, it makes sense, doesn't it? Jupiter's a planet of expansion, Saturn is a planet of restriction, and right now people are very nervous about the markets, and there are fears of a stock market crash. There are fears of recession, Trump's tariffs, and so that's something that's going on all the time. And Mercury brings it into focus. So Mercury makes that square to Saturn, makes a conjunction to Jupiter. So it reminds us that all is not well with the global economy. And it makes us think about it and makes us talk about it. And in terms of what we see, what we read, and what we worry about with that Mercury, I think it is about the economy. I think that's mainly what it's about. Now, my view, as I've expressed on several occasions, with these worries of a crash, recession, and so forth, I am not convinced in the midterm that the world is going into recession. Certainly, America. It feels like it at the moment. I do know that, but this is the sort of first quarter cycle of Jupiter-Saturn. It's quite unusual to have a major and lasting stock market and economic downturn at this stage in a decade. We've had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in sort of around 2020, and so this is the first quarter. There's tension, there's stress, but my general feeling is that in a few months' time, certainly America will get round it. I don't know about Europe. Europe seems to be in a lot of trouble. But as far as America is concerned, Jupiter is about to go into Cancer. Of course, the United States is geocentrically, Jupiter is going into Cancer. Saturn goes into Aries, so we do have that Jupiter-Saturn square. Jupiter moving into Aries, Jupiter moving into Cancer, Saturn moving into Aries. I think that's in June. So that's coming up, and I just do think that later in the year, the picture won't look as difficult as it does right now. But going back to today, that Mercury aspecting Saturn and Jupiter could bring that into focus. But Mercury is also making a conjunction to Jupiter heliocentrically, and that does remind us that we've got to keep positive. And if we are positive, there is some positive energy out there. If we are positive, then we can bring that positivity to bear. It's not necessarily going to be easy to be positive, but the cosmos takes a view that there are some things to be optimistic about, and if we can channel that optimism, which I think we can, then we can make our little part of the world a lot better and a lot happier. And having done the heliocentric analysis, I want to consider the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, March the 5th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you feel a sense of excitement, a feeling that things can be better and that you don't have to be satisfied with the way things are. And Aries, you might believe that you can escape from something. I think you can. So if something has become boring, it's holding you back, it's causing you worries, then there may be a chance to make a clean break. Certainly a quick break. It might not be completely clean, but you can just change your attitude and just walk away from something that has just been doing you no good. And it may be a state of mind, having a certain amount of negativity, or perhaps feeling that you had a commitment to someone or some idea or some plan of action. You felt you had this commitment and it was a real drag and it was making you miserable. And now you suddenly see, no, it's not necessary to have that commitment at all. You can really break free. And while you're at it, you can be open and honest. You can be an Aries. And you're helped by the fact that Mercury is moving through your sign. We know Mercury is moving through your sign. It might go retrograde in just over a week, 10 days, but right now Mercury is moving forward in Aries. You can say exactly what's on your mind, and you can probably get away with it because Mercury is being aspected by the moon. So we've got Moon Mercury sextile, and that Moon Mercury sextile is really going to allow you to tell people what's on your mind. You can communicate freely. You don't have to apologize, and also you'll get the balance right. You'll know what to say. You might offend people a little, but not to any great extent. So that moon sextile Pluto moon sextile Mercury really does allow you to be yourself and to explain yourself. And I think that in most cases people are going to listen to you and they're going to give you what you want. And if you need to explain something, explain a course of action, that you've decided to do something, and you might be a little bit worried about how other people are going to respond, then there's no need to worry about it. You can just tell people what you're intending. Don't be ambiguous about it. Don't sit on the fence. Be clear and be open, and that kind of honesty will be appreciated. And I think in most cases people are just going to say, fine, that's good, that's the way you want to be, and the best of luck. So Aries, it is a day of freedom, and it's also a day when you need to respect other people's freedom, and you need to be able to listen to what other people say. Some people have their own ideas. It's not just you who've got ideas, and some people's ideas may be different from your own, and there could be some disagreements. But just because people have disagreements doesn't mean you have to have an argument about it. Not a seriously emotional argument. It's not that kind of day. The moon's in Gemini. With moon in Gemini, people talk and people understand each other's words. It is only words. And that's how you should see it. I think that's how everyone else is going to see it. And while there's a conversation, while people are being open about what they think, then there's nothing to worry about. The problems start when people are not being open. But today is a day for honesty and complete transparency about what you think and what you believe. Taurus Taurus, it's a transitional day. The moon starts today in your sign, and then it moves on into Aquarius. Sorry, moves into Gemini. And so with the moon when the moon's in Taurus, it makes a conjunction to Uranus. Now, that conjunction to Uranus is going to be strongest if you are in Australia or New Zealand. If you're in Europe, you'll feel it to some extent. If you're in the Americas, it's going to be quite subtle. But with that moon conjunct Uranus, Taurus, you may be a little stubborn. You might be very clear about what you want, and you won't be really in the mood for change. You at least to begin with, and you might really be holding on tightly to things, and it may almost be your way of rebelling. This is about your identity, and it is not something you are going to compromise. But moon moon making this conjunction to Uranus, it's quite a short-lived aspect. And as the day progresses, the moon moves into Gemini. In fact, if you're in the Americas, the moon moves into Gemini quite early. Sort of, that would be at around 4:29 in the morning if you're in California, 7:29 in the morning if you're in New York, so lunchtime if you're in Europe. But when the moon moves into Gemini, when the moon moves out of Taurus, you do become a little more reasonable, and you start to be open to new possibilities. And there might be a certain financial element to moon moving into Gemini. Thinking about money in a different way. Recently you might have had a very single-minded view of money and what should be done with money and how you need to react to sort of ongoing financial issues. But with the moon moving into Gemini, you can suddenly start to see different possibilities, and that might be something that you should be thinking about, because the moon does make a trine to Pluto, and with that moon trine Pluto, you might have a revelation about what you can do with money, and how money can help you, and how money can come your way. It will require a little bit of a change that won't be 100% easy, but certainly is possible. And that moon trine Pluto today, money aside, it does help you project who you are, and it projects your fundamental competence, and your competence is related to your persistence and your reliability, but also your intelligence. And you can be intelligent about material things, and that intelligence will be appreciated, especially later in the day. Once the moon moves out of Taurus, there's no longer any planets in earth signs except for Aquarius, but Taurus is always an earth sign. That's Taurus, and your ability to concentrate on the material, even if the material seems to be obscured, will be appreciated. And yes, at the same time, you can show some real intelligence. And it is a day also, Taurus, when you can give a good account of yourself. You're in a position where you can stand up for your own beliefs and your ideas. But once the moon moves into Gemini, you're not going to be quite so stubborn about it. You'll have a little bit of flexibility, and you'll be able to consider different viewpoints. But your own fundamental principles won't be forgotten, and you won't forget that, and you'll be able to concentrate on what matters. And yes, you will be able to give a good account of yourself, and your ability to argue your case will be excellent. Gemini. Gemini, the moon is moving into your sign, and moon moving into your sign makes you feel happier and more competent, more with it. And when the moon moves into your sign, it straight away makes a sextile to Mercury. Mercury is, of course, your ruler. So there is a real sort of Gemini Mercury feel to today, certainly if you're a Gemini, and you can really be yourself. So who are you? What is your way of expressing your sign? There are different Geminis. There's no one type of Gemini. I mean, Geminis range from someone who likes to gossip. That's one approach to Gemini. Even if you regard yourself as being a very elevated Gemini, an intellectual Gemini, you still can get hooked on trivia. And I'm saying it as a Gemini. My sun is in Gemini. And speaking as a Gemini, there is still an interest in things which one shouldn't really be interested in, but one still is. I mean, to give an example, I like to regard myself as someone who is fairly intelligent, who can look at the big picture, who doesn't focus on gossip and things that are just irrelevant to the larger philosophical view that one should have. Yet, if you've been watching my videos, you'll have noticed that I sometimes have spent a long time talking about Harry and Meghan. I mean, Harry and Meghan is something that is of no interest, or should be of no interest to anyone, but I still do loads of videos about Meghan, and for some reason I find trivial things like Meghan and Harry fascinating, and that might be a Gemini trend, or not a trend, a Gemini feature. So there are other types of Geminis. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, the existentialist. He had his sun in Gemini, and sun in Gemini can do a lot of thinking, a lot of philosophizing. Sun in Gemini can reduce everything to its component parts and come to a conclusion that it's all pointless, that it's all an absurdity, that life is just the theatre of the absurd, and we all die in the end, and it's all meaningless. And so that Gemini can manifest in many different ways, and it is a very Gemini day. And so whatever it is that makes you a Gemini is going to be exaggerated, and maybe that's a good thing. Enjoy being a Gemini, though don't go too far. As far as details are concerned, moon, with the moon sextile Mercury, Gemini, your verbal skills are likely to be excellent. You really can say what's on your mind, and you can say it with a lightness of touch. And I was going to say that you could say it in a way that is powerful, but it's not really about being powerful. It's about having a lightness to it that people appreciate. You don't come over as being a fanatic. Okay, you might, at the beginning of the day when the moon was in Taurus, before the moon moved into Gemini, that moon making a conjunction to Uranus can be a bit fanatical. But now that the moon is in Gemini, as the moon moves into Gemini, you do become open, and so variety is going to be very important to you. And yet, there can be moments of seriousness. you're not entirely forgetting about reality and what is not possible and what the restrictions are from the outside world. You've got half an eye open. You can see those restrictions, and you can see the limits. And if anyone starts to cross those limits, if you start to cross the limits, if, for example, you start to move from the legal to the illegal, then your alarm bells ring. If someone is doing something a bit unusual, that's fine. You relax. You're relaxed, you don't mind. But when they start moving a little bit further out and they start doing something that is dangerous or unwise, you can suddenly flip and you see it, and it's just there. And that's not actually what the day is about in its entirety, but you've got that capacity to suddenly be very, very serious and to be aware of what is possible, to be aware of the rules, to be aware of danger, to be aware of how one can be punished, and if you go too far. And so you might give a slightly misleading impression of just being 100% relaxed. You can do this, you can do that, but it's not 100%. Your alarm bells are working, and if you see something going wrong, they will ring straight away, and you will take fast action. And if you need to criticize anyone or bring someone down to earth today, you, Gemini, can actually do it very well. Cancer. Cancer, you're able to give a very good account of yourself. You have no problems telling people, who you are and what you want, and it's all done in a way that is just easy, and you don't have to think too much. The ideas just come thick and fast, and you don't have to shout. But there's absolutely no need to make a big effort to be seen and heard. If people need to see and hear you, they will. If you feel that it's important that people understand your message, then that's not a problem. But there really is no need to make an effort, and a lot of your energies may just go into your private world because that's the way you'd like it to be, and you can just do things your way, and if no one is aware of what you're doing, well, so much the better. And as far as aspects are concerned, we have we've got a sextile between the moon and Mercury. We've also got a trine between the moon and Pluto, and so those aspects really do make you quite powerful, but in a gentle way. You're not infringing on anyone's freedom, on anyone's liberties. It's just that you know what you want, and if you're working over the course of the day, then I do think that you can be very effective. And whatever you were planning to happen today, you can make it happen. But you can make it happen in such a way that it's done in a way that is just natural, and it's spontaneous, and people just don't really notice what's going on. You just do your stuff, maybe you do your stuff a little bit differently today, but you don't announce the fact that you are doing things differently. And in fact, there might be something, Cancer, about you that is a little bit secretive. You don't have to reveal all of your intentions. Maybe you don't have to reveal any of your intentions. And if something is important to you and you really want it to happen today, then yeah, it might be best that you just don't tell anyone, that you just quietly get on with it. And in that way, you'll very quickly get the results you're looking for. And you can, in many cases, get your message across without saying anything. And it may just be connected with your influence. You have an influence which you don't necessarily have to talk about. You are you, and you occupy a space, a time. There's a time and a space that you occupy, and at an unconscious level, people just can't ignore you. Consciously, they might not see you, but unconsciously, they know you're there, and that does influence their actions. And almost without knowing it, they do things your way. And this means, Cancer, that you can have a long distance influence, and it's just there. It may work on some psychological level. You being able to link with some collective, not the entire collective unconscious, but groups of people have a mini collective. For example, that could be at work or with your friends, a group of people. There's a mini collective, and you can have an influence on that, and you can get people to do things without telling them to do it. They just do it because they know what you want without really having to think about it. So you have a very real power today, but it's an understated power which may not be immediately obvious. Leo, you at the moment would appear to be pretty sociable. Your social life should work as well as it can. Of course, different Leos have different approaches to their social lives. It might be that your social life is completely unimportant to you. It might be that you're a hermit. Leos can be hermits. There's no one sign that fits the hermit, even though I think the tarot card, the Hermit, is connected with Virgo, isn't it? But no, Leos can be hermits, but you're probably not a hermit. And so whatever your social activities are, whatever your normal social activity is, it can be enhanced today. And I think as far as possible, you should try to have a busy social life, and you should sort of try to meet people and give people your insights, listen to what people are saying, because the moon is in Gemini, and it's making a sextile to Mercury. That's a very talkative aspect, and you can talk about many different subjects, and there's something about you that is interesting, and I think that you're going to find other people interesting, and other people can just allow you to see things in a different way. But there's no need to get caught on any one person, on any one situation. Just enjoy the group, just being with people and shining your light, and seeing what you've got to say, and not necessarily talking too much. even though the moon is making a sextile to Mercury. You've got to think about the flow of communication, the fact that there is a need to listen as well as to talk, and some Leos might have a few fears, and that might sound completely contradictory thing to say. I've talked about everything light and socializing and whatever, but there is still a fear there, a creeping fear, just in the background, and it's something you're picking up on in terms of the vibes, and if you just sort of let go and think about the way everything is going, then you might come to a conclusion that maybe things are not going as well as they should, and that shouldn't bother you. It shouldn't be particularly personal, but it might bother you a little bit. And this might be because, one reason for this might be because the sun is in Pisces, and of course the sun has been in Pisces for a couple of weeks. But with the sun in Pisces, it's quite an intense place for the sun. The sun is your ruler, and it's starting to move towards a conjunction of Saturn, and there is this feeling that just on the horizon things are changing. Again, not necessarily for you, but for everyone, and that sort of darker forces are at work, and that is something that you should be starting to think about. So how does that relate to your social life? I just threw that concept in, and it may say something about how you should socialize and what you should talk about, and somehow if you can get some feedback on some of your suspicions, because there are some suspicions in the background. You're not really focusing on them completely, but it would be good to hear what other people have to say, because they might have their own insights. And if you find that your suspicions are shared by other people, that's going to make you feel a lot better. And that is another good reason to socialize. If you don't socialize, if you just spend the whole day alone, then you might start to build up an impression and not get any objectivity there, not get no feedback on that impression, and that might lead you to exaggerate, to sort of draw the wrong conclusions. But when you're with people, there's a sense in which you can get an idea about the truth of the matter and get a certain sense of perspective. Virgo, the big aspect today is a sextile between Mercury and Pluto. It's a relatively powerful aspect. In itself, Mercury sextile Pluto is it's not that powerful. It's just a sextile. It's not a square. It's not a conjunction. But given the fact there isn't much else going on, and also the fact that the moon is actually making aspects to that Mercury sextile Pluto. So what we've got Mercury sextile Pluto, then we've got moon trine Pluto, then we've got moon sextile Mercury. Given all of that, I would have said that Mercury sextile Pluto is important, and it allows you to make some changes, to consider some changes, and it could be change in quite a transformative sense. You not being happy with the way things are and feeling that you need to move things on, and that one thing has to go, something else needs to take its place, and that's something that you're thinking about, and you're maybe wondering how are you actually going to turn it into action? I mean, it's all very well having thoughts and fantasies about changing everything, getting rid of things that are holding you back, embracing the future. But can you actually put it into practice? I actually think you can, and you can do it in a way that is easier than you might have imagined, because the moon is involved also with that Mercury sextile Pluto. It just could be about presenting your intentions. That doesn't mean making a lot of noise about it. Presenting it to yourself, verbalizing it. It just may be about you telling yourself that this is going to happen. I certainly don't want to encourage you to make affirmations. I'm not a fan of affirmations in a general sense. Affirmations can be quite miserable, can't they? People writing down what they want to do. I want to be this, I want to be this, and they write it down 100 times. And that reminds me of at school, when I was at school a long time ago, the big punishment was writing lines. You had to write, I must not do this, and you had to write it down 100 times or 500 times, and it was an incredible waste of paper and ink, but that's what you had to do. Or there was at school, I was at this boarding school when I was how old was I don't know, I was at the school between 8 and 13, and there were these things called these scholarship boards, and these boards were all the people who had got scholarships to other schools. And one punishment was you had to sit there and copy out the scholarship boards, and it was just made to be boring and tedious, and that might not be something you want to do, and it does seem boring, but you can go beyond that, and you don't have to be tied to that kind of existence. And that might be about the moon making that sextile to Mercury and trine to Pluto. You can transform things which you don't want to do, and you can move away from it. And this is because the moon is in Gemini, and the moon in Gemini is a high-profile sign in your chart. In fact, the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, that moon-Jupiter conjunction is going to be more of a feature of tomorrow than today, but moon and Jupiter are in the same sign, and that actually allows you to move beyond the tedium and the monotony and transform it. Now, it could be that you are doing something tedious and monotonous, and you are looking at it in the wrong way, and it's all about perception. You could take a task which is totally boring, and you could put it into a wider perspective and actually realize that it is a vital part of who you are and what you want to achieve, and it suddenly makes sense. And so that could be how the moon's sextile to Mercury, sextile to Pluto is working out. But it is a day when you don't have to be satisfied with things, and you don't have to be dramatic either. You don't have to confront anything or confront anybody. You can just make the change and be very clear about it. And if you happen to be confronted, if anyone asks you what you're doing, why you're doing, you're able to give a very good account of yourself. And if need be, you can out-moralize anyone if you're forced to. if you're forced to talk about rights and wrongs, what people should and shouldn't be doing, Virgo, then you can really give people everything. You can, quote chapter and verse, perhaps, and so your own rightness will be clear, and no one should be telling you that you're wrong. And if anyone does try to tell you that you're wrong, you can definitely defend yourself. So, Virgo, it doesn't seem to be a dramatic day on the surface, but actually, if you look at what's going on astrologically, you can really create some big changes without any explosions or fireworks. You just decide that you've had enough of one thing, and you transform it. And that transformation, with Mercury making a sextile to Pluto, that transformation might start off in your mind. You decide that you've had enough of something, and you want to move on to something else, or you want to take things to the next level. You make that decision, and then you actually you go about and you do it. So in terms of power, you really shouldn't underestimate yourself. Libra, you're able to communicate extremely well today, and you can communicate with fire, even with conviction, and if need be, you're able to show a little touch of anger, but just a touch of anger. Maybe it's not anger, maybe it's conviction. And if you feel that something should be done, or something is wrong, or you want to be open about your ideas, this is all something that you really can do, and you can be very impressive about it. And the moon also is moving into Gemini, and moon moving into Gemini, that's nice. Gemini is a sign that you get on very well with, and the moon, when it moves into Gemini, it makes a trine to Pluto. So we've got moon trine Pluto in air signs, and air signs are signs as a sign about objectivity. It's also about communication. It's about ideas. And of course, Libra is an air sign. And with that moon trine Pluto, which is also tied up with Mercury. So we've got moon making a sextile to Mercury. We've got moon making a trine to Pluto. And of course, the moon is kind of making a trine to Libra. There's something just about you that is just a breath of fresh air, and you can clear out the old. So if things have got a little bit stagnant, Libra, stale air, moldy air, it can be removed. I mean, you might be able to literally remove it if the air quality isn't great, but it just might be about the environment in which you're in. And you can also have quite a strong influence on other people. You can question them, and you can get them to move beyond their own stuckness, and just give people a chance to think about what might be possible. And today is not really a day for doing anything that is boring. If it's boring, then really you shouldn't be doing it, and you should be giving yourself as much variety as you need. If you feel you need variety, then make sure you get it. And if you're not getting it, you'll have no problems asking for it, because as I've just said, your ability to communicate at the moment is really very good, and you can communicate with power. And that is the important point, and with conviction. And if you give the impression that you are convinced about something, then there's a fair chance that people really will listen to you, and they'll they'll accept that your way is the best way. And that's how Librans work. Effective Librans, they try to be agreeable, but in the process they can wrong foot their opponents, they can lull their opponents into a false sense of security, and then all of a sudden Libra gets their way. And Libra is, of course, a very political sign. Librans can do very well in politics, and it's because they're able to be ever so subtly manipulative. And with that moon trine Pluto, that is something you can do, especially as Mercury is involved with it. And with Mercury in Aries, you understand people. Mercury in Aries, of course, is your opposite sign, and with Mercury in Aries, you understand people and you have a good sense of their weaknesses, and by understanding people's weaknesses, you can switch the situation, very much in your favour. Scorpio. Scorpio, the moon is moving out of Taurus and it's moving into Gemini. So that does represent a bit of a change. And, with the moon in Taurus, you might have felt that you had to pay some attention to other people. That's what happens when the moon is in Taurus, because the moon is in your opposite sign, and you had to sort of listen to people, you had to try to understand them, and you might have felt a certain sense of obligation there, a tense obligation. The moon was making a conjunction to Uranus in Taurus, and with that moon conjunct Uranus, you maybe just wanted to do something differently, but you felt you couldn't, and you just had to sort of stick with it. But your own feelings of tension were starting to rise, and then the moon moves into Gemini, and then you change. Okay, the moon might not yet be in Gemini. It depends when it moves into Gemini. If you're in the Americas, moon moves into Gemini at the beginning of the day. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it might not move into Gemini until, late this evening or into tomorrow. But the moon does move into Gemini, and that does create a change, and that does make you more self-reliant. And with the moon in Gemini, you feel that you do have to look after yourself, and that you don't feel quite so obliged to do things other people's way, and you can start to contemplate the idea of freedom and making your own choices, making your own plans. And planning does matter at the moment, and planning can be a complete nightmare if other people are involved in this planning, because trying to accommodate other people is difficult at the best of times, and it can be impossible. And as the moon moves into Gemini, you're going to want to create and execute your own ideas and your own planning, and you should, as far as possible, fit things according to your schedule, not anyone else's. And at the same time, Scorpio, the concept of freedom is going to be really important, really, really important. And if something has been restricting you, has been holding you back, you really won't tolerate it any longer. Enough is enough will be your view. And to begin with, it might be difficult to really assert your freedom, and there might be feelings of guilt. Really quite strong feelings of guilt. Maybe you feel you've got an obligation to other people, you've made promises, but then you look at things in a different way, and you just have a moment where you just realize there's no need for guilt. You have to think about yourself. You only live once. It's your life. You can't be leading your life according to other people's diktats. And with freedom could come a sense of relief, And today there might be something that had been bothering you for a long time, and you thought it was serious, and you thought it was going to mess you up, and now you realize that it's nothing like as serious as you'd imagined. It may be nothing, and you can sort of release yourself from it, and in the process you can feel a whole lot better. And so that is a very constructive side to today, but it's a very personal day. It is a day about you, and that's what happens as the day progresses. You become more and more concerned about your priorities, and other people's priorities just become less and less important as you move through the day. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be selfish, because in many cases your priorities and other people's priorities are going to be the same or very similar. But the key thing is to put yourself first. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, the moon is actually starting to move towards a conjunction of Jupiter. I mean, it's slow. I mean, it's not necessarily going to happen today. In fact, it won't happen today. It'll happen tomorrow. But when the moon moves into Gemini, that does mean that the moon and Jupiter are in the same sign, and you should cherish those moments when the moon and Jupiter are in the same sign. Why should you cherish those moments? Well, Jupiter is not going to be in Gemini forever. Jupiter leaves Gemini in June, and so every month the moon and Jupiter will be in Gemini for the next few months. So we've got a couple more moon Jupiter conjunctions left before June, and then it's gone, because Jupiter will have left Gemini. Jupiter will have moved into Cancer and won't come back to Gemini for another 12 years or 11 years. And so with the moon moving into Gemini, you are reminded that Jupiter is in Gemini. You're reminded that Jupiter is in your opposite sign, and it's important to track Jupiter through the signs. And with Jupiter in Gemini in the Sagittarius chart, it's about other people, and it can be about relationships, who you are getting on with and who you're not getting on with. And it just may be a time when you and other people should be coming together, not just you and other people in general. It might be about a particular relationship, that might be already existing, or it could be about a future relationship. And so with the moon in Gemini, moon moving into Gemini, starting to make that conjunction to Jupiter, it is a time to think about other people and how you relate to them, whether you're relating to them in the right way, and you might get some insights about existing relationships. In certain situations, Jupiter in Gemini could be about deciding that you and someone else just don't get on, because with Jupiter in Gemini, you're going to be wanting a lot from other people. You've got high expectations, and if there's someone in your life who is not matching your expectations, you've got to make a choice. Do you think that this situation might change? Can you change the situation? Or maybe the situation is hopeless, and it's just time to just accept that it's not going anywhere. So the influence of the moon moving into Gemini is just a reminder. It's not necessarily that you have to do anything. It's just it's a good time to be looking at your various relationships and asking yourself whether or not they're giving you everything you need, and in certain cases, whether or not you can do better. And So that is a theme for today. And also the moon, when it moves into Gemini, it makes a sextile to Mercury. And that moon sextile Mercury can also be about relationships. It can be about you and another person being able to communicate in a way that is really free-flowing. It's not especially emotional. It's just people saying what's on their mind, you saying what's on your mind, the other person saying what's on their mind, and it's just easy. And it might actually be a very good time to discuss difficult subjects. If you chose another time, you might get angry, the other person might get angry, but today there's a certain objectiveness, and things don't stagnate. When things stagnate and you get stuck on one topic, one area of disagreement, and it just gets difficult and it gets out of control and it gets really unpleasant. But that's unlikely to happen, with Mercury and Aries making a sextile to Jupiter. So today could very well be a day when it's the main theme is relationships. But if it's not relationships, then Mercury sextile Jupiter, let's forget the interpersonal aspect of that. Sorry, did I say Mercury sextile Jupiter? I meant moon sextile Mercury. So with moon sextile Mercury, if it's not about the interpersonal side of things, it might also just be about what you're doing and how you can be creative and how you can enjoy yourself. And whatever you're doing, there's no reason why you can't enjoy yourself. And, now that the moon has moved out of Taurus into Gemini, Gemini is a sign which is about variety, and you deserve variety, and you certainly shouldn't limit yourself to any one possibility. And if you feel that something needs to change, that you need to give yourself a bit of excitement, then with that moon sextile Mercury, that is certainly something you can do. Capricorn, you have an inner vision of the way things can be, and this inner vision has been with you for some weeks. I think I've already talked about it, but it does continue to matter, and it doesn't really matter if some people are negative, if things are going on that you don't entirely approve of. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you can see beyond it all, and you can see that in the end there can be an improvement, and there is a real possibility out there that other people might not be aware of, that you yourself might have doubts about. But as far as you're concerned, change can always be a good thing, and that gives you a perspective which really is quite amazing. It is a welcome relief to some of the short-term pessimism that is all around us. And as far as the specifics of today is concerned, you get that you can't expect things to be wonderful all by themselves, that you do have to put a little bit of work in, perhaps a lot of work in, and you're able to do lots of different things. So you needn't restrict yourself to any one activity. And the more you can do today, the better. And try not to be obsessive. It might be best if you do one thing for a period of time, then before you get bored of it, you move on to something else, and then you might come back to it. So in the Capricorn world, there could be a lot of activity happening in lots of different places, and you have an overall idea about where it's all leading, and because you do have that picture, you maintain that picture. You certainly don't want to be disturbed. You don't want people telling you what to do, trying to interfere with your ideas, because you have fundamentally got it right. And whatever you've decided on, and Capricorns do make decisions. They don't always make their decisions clear, but whatever you've decided on, Capricorn, you need to just continue with it. It's not really a time for having discussions. People suggesting to you, well, maybe you should do it this way, maybe you should do it another way. No, Capricorn, you know which way everything should be done, and you know how things should be, and you're certainly helped by a sextile aspect between the moon and Mercury. You are able to be intelligent, and you're able to tell people why you're doing it, and you're also going to have a good communications with your family with that moon sextile Mercury. So if you're having to interact with members of your family, and you're having to perhaps to negotiate members of your family, that, Capricorn, is something you can do, and it's going to be very easy. And so I don't think you'll have any difficulty getting your way, provided you do show a certain amount of strength. It's not a time to be listening too hard to what other people are saying. People have their views. People's views should be respected, but it shouldn't interfere with with whatever you have got lined up for yourself today. So as far as today is concerned, it's certainly a day of really useful activity, and you do really seem to know where you're going. And as I said at the beginning, you have a vision, and you know that if you're given the freedom to do what you want, to execute your plans in a way you feel is right, you don't allow yourself to be disturbed, then it can all happen your way. And that positive vision I talked about, it really can become a reality. Aquarius. Things are changing, and I think that things are changing for the better. At the beginning of the day, we've got the moon in Taurus, and moon in Taurus, it's quite powerfully placed in the Aquarian chart, but it can be problematic, not least because the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus, and with the moon conjunct Uranus, there may be a feeling of instability. That moon conjunct Uranus is taking place at the bottom of your chart. Taurus is a sign which for Aquarians is very personal, and it represents your roots. And with moon conjunct Uranus, it might feel that something is changing, that you have to really hold on to something tightly, because otherwise you might lose it. It might be taken away from you, and issues of stability may be starting to emerge. How secure can you be? We all have these worries regardless of our sign. And the moon is moving out of Taurus, moving away from that conjunction to Uranus. And when that happens is to an extent dependent on your time zone. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, that moon conjunct Uranus may be a feature of your day. That moon conjunct Uranus is exact, I think around lunchtime, that kind of time. And if you're in the Americas, that moon conjunct Uranus isn't so much to worry about, because in the Americas, moon moves into Gemini very early in the day, and if you're in Europe, moon moves into Gemini around lunchtime. So when the moon moves into Gemini, whenever that is, it's something to, it's something to look forward to. It makes things lighter, makes things easier. Things aren't quite so intense, and you don't take things quite so personally. And when the moon moves into Gemini, it makes a trine to Pluto, makes a sextile to Mercury, and those two aspects, I would have said, are entirely fortunate, and they allow you to be yourself, and not to get caught up in things which are boring and undermine you. You don't have to worry about that, and you can do things your way with the moon moving into Gemini, and you don't have to worry too much about what other people are saying. And if there's something you really want to do, and this thing is going to make you happy and feel that you have a great sense of purpose, then it's gonna work. So that moon in Gemini is very helpful, and also the moon is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Now, that moon conjunct Jupiter is not going to be exact today, it's going to be exact tomorrow, but the moon-Jupiter conjunction is an aspect that is entirely fortunate, especially in the Aquarian chart. And you're already feeling that moon-Jupiter conjunction, and it's about thinking about what is possible. And it's really becoming clear to you that a lot of things are possible, and you shouldn't allow anything to restrict you. So think about what you would like to happen. Think about that positive view of your life and your world. Think about that positive view and start working towards it. And don't ask too many questions. You have a connection with the world, and the world is informing you that something is possible. And so, work towards it. And if you feel that the environment is not supportive enough, or you feel that maybe something is holding you back, then you can change it. Because it is a day when you can change things that you don't like. That's connected with the moon being trine Pluto, or Mercury being sextile Pluto. So you don't have to put up with anything, and you can change things without breaking anything. You can do it. You just maybe move things out of the way, or you think about something else, and you tell yourself that you're not going to bother with something, and you don't bother with something, and it all works out. So Aquarius, at the moment you are really very powerful, and you shouldn't be put off by other people. Other people aren't always going to be especially constructive, and certain people might give you bad vibes. You're not quite sure why or how, but they just are. And you suspect that they might be focusing on the wrong things, they might be overly negative, you're not quite sure about their motivations, and if that's the way you feel, then fine. Just stay out of their way. You don't need people with bad vibes at the moment, and you need to just be in an environment which is conducive to success and the fulfillment of your creative ambitions. So that's what you can do, Aquarius, and you don't really have to think about it too much, and don't make things too complicated. It's not a day for complicated emotions and for getting obsessed with your ego or other people's egos. It's just about you and doing what is right for you and what is right for your purpose. Your ego. Well, you've got to think about your ego to some extent. It's important you look after your ego, but you've got to go beyond your ego and ask yourself what is right for you, and what is right for your particular purpose, and it can all come together because it's that kind of day, and it feeds into tomorrow. So if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then beginning of the day, maybe even for most of the day, things might seem a little bit too complicated, and you might be wondering, in terms of what I've just been saying, is that ever going to happen? Well, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, well, think about what I've said and sort of move it to the end of the day and into tomorrow, because one way or another, every Aquarian will be able to benefit from what are essentially very favourable energies. Pisces. Pisces, the moon is changing sign, and it's moving out of Taurus into Gemini. And when the moon moves into Gemini in the Pisces chart, that can often be a time when you want to restrict your activities, when you don't have to be in all places at once, when you can instead just concentrate on what feels comfortable, on things you trust. There's certainly no need to take risks, and the concept of stability is going to be important with the moon in Gemini. And ask yourself how supportive things are, and if something is not supportive, then perhaps you should steer clear of it. That might be the best approach. And in terms of other people, the moon's making a sextile to Mercury, and that sextile between the moon and Mercury is fortunate in terms of your relations with other people. You can find people who are supportive of who you are and of your ambitions, and so take advantage of this. But it's not that everyone is going to be on your wavelength. You have to choose people who do make you feel comfortable. Now, that moon sextile Mercury might also have a financial dimension, especially as it's tied up with Pluto, because Mercury is making a sextile to Pluto, the moon is making a trine to Pluto. And from a financial perspective, there are things you can do and things you can talk about, and it might actually be quite a good day for discussing finance and money, but in a way that is very down to earth. It's not about talking about all the amazing things that can be done with money, all the amazing things that you can do to make more money. It's not about that. That moon sextile Mercury is about a frank discussion, a frank conversation about money and how money is organized, and you can get to the point, and other people can get to the point as well. So if there's some financial issue that needs to be discussed, with that moon sextile Mercury, now might actually be the time to actually do it, because there is an atmosphere of honesty. And also, from an emotional perspective, things aren't so intense. Money and emotion often run together, but today not so much. So something really can be resolved, and you have to be patient. You can't expect everything to happen at once. If you have big ambitions and you really want things to happen today, then you might be disappointed. Things are a bit slow, although when you're actually talking to someone about a very immediate subject, like money, there can be a very quick flow of communication, and you can cover a lot of ground in a conversational sense and in an ideas sense. But maybe in terms of action, yeah, things could be slow, and it might be better that way. If things were too quick, then you might feel that you're sort of losing control. But it is a day with the moon in Gemini, the moon actually making a conjunction to Jupiter, starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter in Gemini, when you need to concentrate on what makes you feel secure. And if you can focus on security and perhaps talk about security issues, for example money, then it can be a day when you can boost your security and feel a little more comfortable about the future. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 11, peace. It's a very stable, balanced hexagram. 3 unbroken lines at the bottom, 3 broken lines at the top, and it's like, heaven and earth have the right relationship to one another. Things are moving, and we feel that things are coming together, but there's no pressure, and there might have been recent pressure, but it's subsiding, and we're feeling that we really can be comfortable. And because we feel comfortable, there's a sense of flow. And sort of Greg Winkup, in his translation of this hexagram, he actually calls it flowing rather than peace. And so this is this idea of just movement. Things are moving, but they're all sort of moving in the right direction, and everything is right. And so that's really something to be optimistic about. But we do have some moving lines, and the 3rd line from the bottom moves, and so does the 4th line from the bottom. So the 3rd and the 4th lines move, and the 3rd line is often not particularly fortunate. It can be difficult, and what the 3rd line does is it reminds us that nothing lasts forever. So if we're feeling that everything is flowing, that we're at one with the world, that there's nothing to disturb our harmony, then we must be aware that this is a temporary situation. The universe is constantly in flux. As soon as we get used to one situation, it changes into something different. And where there is peace, the absence of war, well, war is just around the corner. It works the other way. Where there is war, there is peace is just around the corner. Where there is hatred, love is just around the corner. It always flips to its opposite, or it can flip to its opposite. And so we must be aware that whatever situation we're in, it's temporary, and that might be part of what the I Ching is all about. The book of changes. Everything is in a state of flux. I mean, if there wasn't a state of flux, if things were set and stuck, then there would be decay and eventual death. So we need movement, and we just have to be just aware that this, whatever situation we're in, is just not going to last forever. And we can enjoy the situation, we can enjoy the present, but we just have to be prepared, and that's something we can do. And there's no sense of misfortune here. All the I Ching says is that we just have to persevere. So when things turn against us, or at least when things don't remain so easy, when difficulties arise, when things aren't so peaceful, we just keep going. We keep in mind what we're looking for, what we're trying to achieve, and we can get there. And then the 4th line moves, and the fourth line is just telling us to be spontaneous, to be open. We don't have to think about our wealth or lack of wealth or whatever advantages we might have compared to other people. We don't need to worry about that. And if we're open and spontaneous, we are going to get the support we need, and indeed perhaps the support we deserve, and that is going to allow us to progress, and also it allows us to make the world a better place. And if we help other people, they'll help us, and we just need to be spontaneous and unaffected by it all. And so with these two moving lines, we move to a second hexagram, and we move to hexagram number 54, which is the marrying maiden. And the marrying maiden is in a bit of a hurry. So the previous hexagram was just about accepting the way things are. It's sort of going with the flow and just accepting the ebb and flow of things, and not being too upset if things don't always go our way, and realizing that nothing stays the same forever. Then the marrying maiden does indicate, a certain hurry, and a hurry that is probably inappropriate. So we might find that at a certain stage today we want to push things, and we're going to be in a hurry to seal the deal. Remember, the marrying maiden is the symbol here we have of a woman, a young woman who is in a hurry to get married, and she's in too much of a hurry to get married. There is a right way to do things, and we need to sort of go through the formalities, and we mustn't forget that. And there's just some danger at the end of the day we might forget that, be in too much of a hurry, and we could spoil things. I don't think we're going to spoil things too badly, but just let things run at their own pace, and just go through the formalities, and don't try to force things. And that is the key to having a good day. And now I want to look at myself, and I want to look at the whole concept of myself as an astrologer. And part of the point of this video is just to sort of refer people to it, because people do sometimes want their charts read. I get this in the comments. Do you do readings? And sometimes I reply, sometimes I don't. And this reflects my ambiguity about astrology, even particularly as an astrologer doing charts. That I've always felt, and I've been doing astrology for nearly 40 years, doing charts for nearly 40 years, but still I do have this ambivalence. And in the rest of this video, I just want to try to sort of look at my approach to astrology. And in a way, it's almost going to be a self-review. I haven't reached a stage where people give me stars, 5 stars, 4 stars, 2 stars, whatever. But I want to give myself a self-review, particularly if you're one of these people that comments, do you do charts? And so I want to answer some of those questions. And the place I really wanted to start was actually my own chart, because I think my own chart says something about me as an astrologer and how I do astrological readings, and it might say why you wouldn't want to have your chart read by me. So here is my chart. Let's look at it. There it is. That's my chart. I was born May the 30th, 1962, at 3:35 a.m. And so I've been doing people's charts since 1980. I don't know, I think I did my first chart for money in 1987. Was it 86? I think it was 87. And so here is my chart. Now, you can see the good things about my chart in terms of me as an astrologer, supposedly. Jupiter trine Neptune trine Venus. And, that looks very nice. I mean, I've got Venus in Cancer. Venus in Cancer in the third house, quite close to the IC. And it's in mutual reception with Jupiter by exaltation. So Venus is in Cancer in the exaltation of Jupiter. Jupiter's in Pisces, mutual reception, the exaltation of Venus. And so you might say that that's great for being an astrologer, particularly when you throw Neptune in or Chiron in. I've got my exact Jupiter-Chiron conjunction, trine Neptune, trine Venus. And so you might say, well, that does give me the sensitivity I need to be an astrologer, that I am sensitive to the people I am seeing, I'm working with. And this may not just apply to astrology, it might apply to the I Ching. I don't really do tarot cards anymore, but I have done tarot cards in the past. I actually had, for a period of time, I spent a lot of time doing tarot card readings, but not recently. But that might give me a certain flexibility and emotional flexibility and sensitivity, and me being able to understand the person I'm doing a reading for. And so that might be the perfect qualification astrologically for doing this kind of work. But it's not really as simple as that. And there are other things going on in my chart. And I should say also that my Venus in Cancer is always an enigma for me. Even though I've been looking at that Venus in Cancer for over 40 years, it doesn't fully make sense. It's not quite as emotional as it should be, and it's doesn't necessarily find it that easy to relate. You're supposed to be able to relate. Now, I've had fantasies in the past about being a psychotherapist, about being a counsellor. I've done psychotherapy courses, I've done counselling courses, and I've reached a conclusion that I cannot be a psychotherapist, that I do not have what it takes to be a psychotherapist. And in order to be a psychotherapist, as one is told when one is doing these kind of courses, that you have got to be able to come but get alongside someone emotionally. And that's something I can't do. And that has been pointed out to me, by the way. I can't do that. I'm not temperamentally suited for psychotherapy. So that's one way in which this grand trine in water is not working. But the question is why? And the reason might be connected with my Taurus rising. I have got Taurus rising, and I've got Mars in Taurus. And that Mars in Taurus is, obviously it's an earth sign. Mars is in its detriment in Taurus. And it's a malefic, and it may inhibit my sensitivity. It certainly stops me getting alongside people. I think that Mars in Taurus is not great in terms of relating to people on an emotional level. So it kind of contradicts that grand trine in water. But also with that Mars in Taurus and that Taurus rising, and this is the key point about me and astrology, is that it makes me literal. I take astrology absolutely seriously. And as I'm really quite single-minded about it. So if I do someone's chart, as far as I'm concerned, my job is to tell you what's going on in your horoscope. And it's as simple as that. And I will look at the various stuff in your chart, and also in terms of the future, and whether using solar returns, transits, progressions. I will just tell it as it is. And if you want to be a successful astrologer, that is not good, I don't think, because you have to ask, why do people consult astrologers? Well, for the same reason very often that they consult psychics or tarot card readers or anyone else. People consult astrologers because very often they want to know that things are going to get better. They're looking for an improvement. And I hate to say this, but very often there is a lack of agency here. That somehow, if you consult an astrologer, things are going to be made better, or if you're consulting a psychic, and you're not actually looking for someone to say what's going to happen next. You're actually looking for someone to change the future. And if you think about that excitement that one has as one is about to have a reading, for example, with a psychic, very often there is that excitement that people have. They're going to have their chart done, or they're going to have their cards done. And there is this excitement, there is this anticipation that somehow the reader is going to make things better for you. They're going to predict something good. That feels great. And the reader is just going to be aware of that pressure. And I was talking last night again to a friend about me and astrology and how I work as an astrologer. And I was talking to this friend who's very familiar with my work, and she told me, "Oh, you're the best astrologer in the world." Everyone says that. I mean, that's just being polite. I'm not claiming to be the best astrologer in the world, by the way. But at the same time, she was, quite critical of my approach, because I don't play the game. And there is a game, which I think every successful astrologer and psychic probably has to play. And that game is making things better than they actually are. And you have to present a vision of the future which makes you feel optimistic and happy. Hence, and that goes back to that excitement just before you see a psychic or an astrologer. They're going to tell you good things. But as far as I'm concerned, going back to the fact that I've got Taurus rising, Mars in Taurus, and I see things in a very matter-of-fact way. I'm not even sure if I see it as my role to say that things are going to be good. I can give advice. I can say, well, if things are going to be bad, then you need to do this, this, and this, and this. But to tell people that some things are going to be good, I mean, it's difficult, because there is a lot of pressure to tell people how wonderful it is. But I am not convinced that astrology can actually always do this. And this raises the question of what is a good astrologer. I'm certainly not the best astrologer in the world, far from it. I understand astrology. I've been studying astrology for a long time. And the thing about astrology is, you get to learn what works and what doesn't work. When I started doing astrology in the 80s, when I started doing charts, my first charts were always written. I'd always do written charts. I'd do these sort of 20-page written readings. They'd take me days. In fact, I actually got to a stage where I could do it in a day, and I never charged enough for them. But I did these written readings, and which are completely exhausting. But I remember those first readings and how you would do it, how you would look at a Jupiter transit, and you would look at, I don't know, Jupiter transiting Venus, and you would come up with all these wonderful things that were going to happen to people in terms of love and money and career, and you could just focus on Jupiter and all this stuff. And, this is what people wanted to hear, and it was all very easy, and that's what you do. But reality is, it doesn't happen, and Jupiter transits are really very unreliable. And a lot of what astrology is, as I have gone through astrology and as I've learnt about it, it's important not just to know what actually works in astrology, but actually what doesn't work. And that's the key. I mean, at least that's a very minimum. And a lot of things in astrology just don't work. And there's also this dreadful fact, and it's a terrible thing to say, that in astrology it is much easier to predict bad news than good news. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. And so that makes it really difficult to function as an astrologer, because there is going to be that bias to the negative. Now, some of you might be listening to me and say, well, that's just your perspective. That's just my bias. That just says something about my psychology. No, I'm not convinced. I think this really is the case. And if you look at the history of astrology, and if you look at if you read, Placidus, who came up with the Placidus house system, his primum mobile, he talked about the technical side of astrology, but he talked about some charts he did and what happened, and he focused a lot about death and how he was predicting death. And I'm not saying I don't predict death; that's not my thing. And if you look at Christian astrology in William Lilly's casebook in the 17th century, in many cases he often isn't positive. And so there is actually a tradition, if you like, in astrology of actually focusing on the negative. And of course there's John Worsdale, who, working in the beginning of the 19th century, who was predicting death, and he didn't really focus about predicting good things. And there is that tradition in astrology, which is there, which is real. And I am absolutely convinced that that tradition continues. And there is still pressure from the client to predict good things, to say that it's all going to be wonderful. And I would guess that many astrologers do give in to that pressure, and certainly sort of psychics, card readers would tend to give in to that pressure. I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, if you are completely honest with people, are they really going to come back? Because they're probably not going to come back. And so that is the issue. And also in terms of good news, people want good news. And let's be honest about life. In the average life, there are probably six important events. You're born, go to school, get married, have children, have a couple of job successes, have a few failures, and then you die. It's 6, something like that. It depends. Now, with very successful people, it's going to be more. They might have tons and tons of successful events, but most people don't have many big things happening in their lives. And that's the reality of the thing. And so here as an astrologer, you're trying to create this picture of all these wonderful things. I mean, I think that was more of a problem when I started doing charts, when I was exaggerating Jupiter transits. But it really is an issue. And that feeling of, I'm going back to that feeling of excitement, when you feel that the astrologer is going to make things great for you, is going to create a wonderful future for you, and that's something that I don't do. I can't do it. To me, it is completely literal. I do take astrology literally. My aim when I do a chart is to be as accurate as possible. That's all I'm trying to do, and of course I don't often succeed entirely. I do very often get it wrong, but that is my aim, and my aim is not to feed into people's fantasies. That's what I'm trying to do, and some areas are more difficult than others. Relationships are notorious. People very often consult astrologers because they want an uptick in their love lives. And that's always been the case. If you look at William Lilly in the 17th century, you look at his casebook, loads of people asked him, is this relationship going to happen? And he had to deal with it. But it is treacherous. And the reality is that if someone comes to an astrologer and they have just met someone, or they're wondering whether this relationship is going to work, or particularly if they haven't even started a relationship, or they want to know whether their love life is going to improve anytime soon, when they come to an astrologer, the very action of them coming to an astrologer suggests that it's not going to happen, because they know at an unconscious level. And love and relationships, I don't like dealing with that area, because if one is honest, very often just the answer is no. I mean, that's always is. That's the honest answer. But of course, that's not what people pay for. There is this question: what do people want from an astrologer? And so that does make things difficult. And going back to me, and I've got my Mars in Taurus, and I've got my Saturn in Aquarius, and I'm a Gemini. So that my grand trine in water is that's part of it, but I am very literal, and I'm quite analytical and logical in terms of my astrology. Am I accurate? I mean, that is the question. I'm probably as accurate as anyone, but I think that people are not looking for accuracy, and part of being accurate is very often just saying, well, actually, nothing is going to happen, and that's the way it is. And you can tell that things are really bad in an astrological reading when you start to problem solve. That's the worst thing when someone comes to see you, and it's often someone coming with a problem, often a problem connected with sort of money. Money is a real issue, and someone wants to know that things are going to improve in terms of money and career, or some intractable aspect of their life. And you just know, I know that it's just not going to happen. And someone has, it's not going to happen. It doesn't matter what I say; it's just not going to happen. And yet, this person has come to solve the problem, and you analyze it and you try to problem solve with the chart. Well, you can do this and you can do that, and so on. But it doesn't really work, and so that is a real issue. And as far as why would anyone want to consult me? See, I'm trying to put you off. I'm trying to put anyone off. I'm saying that it is a very difficult thing for someone to actually benefit from an astrological reading. And I don't think this is just about me. I have in the past talk to people who have visited famous astrologers, astrologers whose names you might have heard of. And very often they are somewhat disappointed. Even with famous names, they spend money, and they can then say, oh, they've had a reading with this astrologer or that astrologer, but there is this sense of disappointment. They didn't get everything they wanted, and that can be an issue with astrology and visiting an astrologer. And it's much more exciting to visit a psychic, because a psychic can come up with all sorts of stuff. A psychic can imagine things, can give the impression that they really are seeing the future in precise detail, and they can see it, and they can see the positivity. The problem with psychic readings is, of course, a psychic, perhaps more than an astrologer, where there's no objectivity. I mean, when I do a chart reading for someone, you can take that chart away, and you can take what I say, and you can take it to another astrologer, and you can get some alternative view. I say you've got transing Jupiter trine your Venus. That's an objective fact. I interpret it in one way. Nothing's going to happen. You go to another astrologer and they say, oh no, that's going to be great. You're going to meet the love of your life. But there is a sense in which you can validate an astrology reading by going to another astrologer. When you go to a psychic, there's no validation, because a psychic reading is completely subjective. And so the psychic can come up with all sorts of things without needing any justification, and they don't have to explain themselves. There's no body of rules for psychic readings. And so a psychic reading, if one is feeling one wants reassurance, a psychic reading is certainly going to be a lot more helpful in the short term. Longer term, well, I think that there is a tendency to think about the present. Perhaps the psychic's aim is to make someone feel good in that reading. And what happens afterwards, I mean, who cares? Of course, my perspective is kind of different. I'm not necessarily trying to make someone feel good in that reading, but I'm just worried that I might say something that is inaccurate. So there might be a difference there. And then there's the question of why would you want to have your chart done, and who should consult me? And I am of a view that the worst reason to consult an astrologer, absolute worst reason, is curiosity. If you consult an astrologer out of plain curiosity, I just don't think it's going to work, because there's no reason for the reading, and the whole thing is just completely unsatisfying. I think that the worst readings I've done, have been when people come to me out of curiosity. There has to be a reason for the reading, and the more specific that reason is, the better. And the more realistic someone is, the better. Ideally, it should be focused on something very short. Should I do this? Is this the right thing to do? And of course, in that, if it's really specific, you don't even need to worry about a natal chart. You can use a horary chart, and horary chart is, of course, when you set up a chart for the time a question is done. So when you ask me a question, I answer the question, and I set up a chart for that precise question, and that's it. I read it, and when I get a good chart, when I get a radical chart, a chart I can judge. I mean, radical means there are some charts that you can't judge. There are rules against judgment. If I get the chart that I can judge, then I've got a very good chance of getting it right. In fact, I should get it right. There's no reason to get it wrong. And so there has to be a reason, ideally, and one should never ever consult an astrologer when one is in a when one is in a state of desperation, I think, because if you're in a state of desperation, it's sort of last resort. I was looking through a house some years ago, and the house had been foreclosed, and I think that the owner of the house had run into financial issues, and I was in the basement of this house, and amongst the papers in this house was a computer printout of a horoscope. They'd had their entire chart done, those computer charts, pages and pages and pages of it, and this was. I got the impression, maybe wrong, but in his desperation, he was looking for answers, and he got his chart done. And that's when you've reached that stage. Astrology, in most cases, is really not going to help. And the problem here is not just that the situation is so bad that nothing. That really, what can an astrologer say? And of course, from my perspective, if things are bad and I see a chart and I see things are bad, or if I see nothing good is going to come, what am I going to say? And in the end, I just come back to problem solving. And when you've reached problem solving, it's a waste of time. You should end the reading. And so that is an example of where you should never consult an astrologer. Who should consult an astrologer? Well, ideally, a person consulting an astrologer should have complete agency. And the irony is, I think, that the kind of person who would benefit most from an astrological reading is probably the kind of person who would never have an astrological reading. And this is because of the sense of possibilities. So what astrology is doing is creating a number of possibilities, because if you actually use the symbolism of the chart, you can see what could happen if you did the right thing. And if you have someone who is, for example, completely in control of their life, who is already successful, who is planning different initiatives here, there, and everywhere, then actually this person could probably benefit from astrology. The astrology would actually make them even more successful. I'm really quite convinced about this. But that kind of person, by and large, would not consult an astrologer because they have a belief in their own agency. So the other kind of person who would consult an astrologer is someone who has no agency, who really is looking for the astrologer to sort things out. And in that case, then I have my concerns, because I actually think that the astrologer can actually do nothing for them. In fact, they can just make things worse by giving false hope. Well, I don't give false hope. You see, that's my problem. That's not my thing, giving false hope. And so it is a really quite an impossible profession, being an astrologer. And even though I've been doing it for 40 years, I like to be able to sort of analyze it. And I suppose in this video, which is a really self-destructive video, I'm sort of undermining myself. But it's really difficult, astrology, and I don't play the game. So if you're thinking about consulting me, as some people are, my question is, why are you doing it, and what do you actually hope to achieve, and what do you expect me to say? Because as I've said, it is much more. It's easier to predict bad news from good news. Now, there is also then a cultural aspect to astrology, and from a cultural perspective, people expect different things. I remember one of the first readings I did. It was in the again in the 1980s. I don't know, 1987, 1988, and something like that. And I had studied astrology at the Faculty of Astrological Studies, and I got my diploma, and I was very pleased with myself for getting the diploma. And it was a fairly psychologically orientated reading, and I did someone's chart, and he was Indian, and I did my thing. I did the chart, and at the end of the chart, he said to me, "Can you recommend a good astrologer?" Because, from a cultural perspective, I had not provided what he wanted, and that is an issue with astrology. And after that, I started to study Vedic astrology, and Vedic astrology it does focus more on what is actually going to happen, and you can get Vedic astrology badly wrong, but Vedic astrology can also be very accurate. And different cultures have different ideas about astrology and about dealing with things. So modern Western culture wants to be told that everything is going to be fine. I think the power of positive thinking is there. So if I am positive as an astrologer, then job done. If I can tell you that things are going to be wonderful, if I can affirm you, that's great. But again, that's not what I do. That's not how I see astrology, because I'm very literal about it. Now, from the perspective of a different culture, it might be different. I mean, looking at William Lilly's casebook in the 17th century, when you were dealing with a Christian culture where people believed in an afterlife, people consulted William Lilly and said, saying they were sick, and he would, for example, he might say, well, what I did is I just told him that to get his house in order, get his affairs in order, because I did not see that he would live beyond particular dates. So he would tell people they were going to die. He would tell women that they wouldn't have any children. He would be very down to earth about it, matter of fact about it, because he was dealing with people who had the same kind of problems as they have now, but he was dealing with a more fatalistic society, and people who did believe in a God and an afterlife, and who could deal with death, and who didn't regard death as being the end of it, which is very different. Yeah, very different from Western society now. Now, on the other hand, if you look at Indian culture, and of course, I think most astrologers in the world are in India. I think that's still the case. Then there is more sort of fatalism, and if you think about sort of reincarnation, we are born with a certain destiny. So if you give someone bad news, and they come from an Indian culture, it is possible that they're going to be more accepting of that bad news, and they're going to perhaps want you to be more open and honest about what is possible. So there is a cultural issue there, but yeah, I think I've kind of said enough. I think I've given you an impression about me and my astrology. I do think I'm a good astrologer. As I said, I don't think I'm the best astrologer in the world. I'm quite technical. I've gone through a number of different techniques. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. There's no technique that I've gone into in super detail. There are astrologers out there who focus entirely on Vedic astrology. There are others who can focus on Hellenistic astrology, and you've got Uranian astrologers, and So they've really gone into one aspect of astrology more deeply than I have. But as a jack of all trades, master of none, that's probably my specialization, and I do try to focus on getting it right. That's my focus. That's my aim, and in the process, I may be shooting myself in the foot, because many people coming to astrology, they don't actually want the truth. They actually want to know that things are going to get better, and perhaps there's pressure for me to just make people feel good just for the sake of it. But that's not the kind of pressure that I'm going to fall for. And no, I'm not going to play the game. But still, I do charts, if you're asking. My email address is talkingastrology@gmail.com. I charge $200 for a 2-hour reading. I'm not saying that as a point of advertisement. I'm just saying that's what I do. But in a way, in this video, I'm kind of trying to warn you off. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.